defending Dominicans online is outlawed, you could say. You know, they consider me kind of controversial when in fact, I don't think I'm controversial at all. I just think we're entering a new era of what it is to be Dominican. I'm here showing the young, bright minds, Hispanic minds, that have the future ahead of them. It's out with the old and in with the new. So, Peter, introduce yourself to the audience and let them know like what you what you contribute to this enlightenment.
Greetings to everyone. I'm Peter Mola. I'm a writer, researcher, and also a professional wrestler. I'm wrestling this Friday night in Teaneck, New Jersey for American Championship Entertainment. I'm passionate about, you know, investigating, comparing, and contrasting, looking into our past. I like to read, especially right now, about Latin American history. Also into studying about Arawak languages and how it connects with the Taino language, such as with the Garifuna language and the Garinagu who speak Garifuna today. And just, encouraging our community to be more informed, science literate, and to make arguments with intelligent arguments so that way we can empower ourselves and just share the information and the learn.
Thank you, Macho. And Peter, just wanted to comment on the video that Macho started off with. That was a really great um, information to share with everyone. And I think that my background is in education. I was a former educator and walked away from that last year. But my concern was seeing the curriculum that is being introduced to students at the classroom level about their own history, which isn't often spoken about in the same context that we're talking about. Um, and in lots of public school settings, the agenda that is set forth for these students is coming from a Afrocentric perspective, denying them of their own history. And these things are of great importance to me for the new generation. And in these social spaces that we have, a lot of up and coming second generation Dominicans don't know anything about their history. They're learning from it in academic settings that often use Trujillo, 19, the massacre of the Perejil. That's all they know about Dominican Republic. And I think it's important for us to have these conversations and especially on social media, a lot of these anti-Dominican rhetorics, like you mentioned, deny us of our own history, of our own conversations. And I'm just excited to be here tonight and provide whatever context I can. So thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me here. But yeah, like Macho said, I do some activism in Puerto Rico, but not just that. I have been focusing more on helping communities and local farms because they do need that help a lot. I also work with Juventud Nacional, but I think what's more important for me, especially because I'm in Puerto Rico, is to do work in real life. So I don't really do a lot online anymore. I really like, going out there and helping people, especially like right now with Hurricane Fiona that happened not too long ago. It's always good to go out there, and especially if you live in a Hispanic community. I know it's a little harder for the diaspora, but if you're diaspora and there's like Hispanic communities around you, just go out there and try to know what are the needs of the communities around you, what you can do about it. And in Puerto Rico, there's always something to do. So yeah, I really like doing that stuff because I know that my people are in need, and it doesn't matter what political background they come from, what religion they are, whatever their beliefs are, they're all struggling, and that's the one common denominator that we have, even though sometimes we don't really realize that. And yeah, so I like doing that stuff, And I would advise everybody to, if you have a local Hispanic community around you, to do the same thing. Sometimes you don't realize just how much in need some people are.
Hey, what's going on, yo? Pretty much, man. Yeah, man. I've had the pleasure, to meet Macho in real life. Not just over the internet. We met and we, smoked cigars, and we got to gather our thoughts, and us being Hispanic Americans and whatnot, right? Our experience is unique. Us being Dominican, being in New York, and we have a strong hold in New York City or the New York area. Anywhere in the East Coast, you go Jersey, Connecticut, PA, New York, Rhode Island, or Mass. We spread out here, and that's something that I'm kind of proud of my people, that we try our best to stay intact. We we try to be good citizens, but we never let go of the homeland or the motherland. And something that was important to me on YouTube was I was able to connect with people like Macho, with other YouTubers who were Dominican, and I was able to be more prideful of my Hispanic heritage. And you being American, there's so many racial issues, and it's a lot of social issues that happen here. So sometimes you're forced to grab onto your identity, and it's important that regardless of black or white or Taino, Indio, right, that you remember that back in our homeland, in our countries, in our respective countries, that we don't judge people based on what you look like. Is more of your character. Who's your family? What's your last name? What are you doing today? And I'm part of a boxing club. I grew up as a boxer, and I could say that my contribution has been, teaching kids how to fight. It's a nonprofit organization, but the thing is too, it wasn't exclusive to just Hispanic kids. It just so happens that Hispanic kids love boxing. So yeah, that's pretty much it, bro.
We're some cultural, meaning we're a mixed bag, you know, with the Taino, Spanish, and African influences that contributes to the Dominican identity. So it's all of those things together that represents La Dominicanidad. So in the States, you see a lot of things with skin color. I like to use this example by Denzel Washington a lot because to me it makes a lot of sense. It's not about color, it's about culture. And for the Dominican ethnic group, there is a cultural difference for us. The other part would be, sometimes when we get locked into certain kinds of thinking, we don't open ourselves up to new information, especially when old theories get thrown out the way, or when just some things just get revised, because as new information comes out, we get to learn more about the past, and we should always have an open mind when those things come out, and just look at what the information presents.
I'll scale it up to the racial tension that's been building, I guess, pre-2020 election, when there seems to be an intentional push to separate Hispanics, Latinos by color. And a phrase that started popping up, I guess around last November or even maybe 2019, was using Hispanics as white adjacent. The Pew Research Center even went ahead and did a study about how Latinos said the skin color impacted their daily life, and they use like this model, this hand chart of like Hispanics by color. So there is a push to start racial like breaking us apart in the same way that America has kind of categorized race, white, black. And like Peter says, we come from nations. We think of ourselves by our nation first, and there seems to be a very aggressive push to strip that identity from us. Um, it poses a threat to the establishment from a voting perspective because historically, Dominicans have voted, Democrat for a long time, and there was a huge shift in 2020, and I believe that is going to continue as we're no longer kind of beholden to a specific like block. We don't vote the same way that the African American community votes, and I think that scares them. And there was that incident in LA where the council member said some sort of comment about uh, black people, and that threw on a whole other conversation about um, the black community blaming Latinos for being racist. So there is that's sort of what I've been putting my ear to the ground on, kind of like the political and media conversations about Latino identity, how our proximity to whiteness, because the conservative movement is growing. So I think it's just that we've become a threat, and we're thinking for ourselves, and traditionally we're very family oriented, community oriented, and as these parties start to shift their priorities, um, we no longer have a political home. So I think that's something that I've just been aware of in terms of how they've been trying to kind of change the Hispanic identity in this country. Politically, it's a threat to them. So it makes sense that with the new wave of quote undocumented migrants, of course they love it. They're going to vote Democrat. So that's kind of what I've been seeing with that.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like with the racial stuff, first of all, I kind of like saw it change throughout time. Because for example, if you're like filling up some legal paperwork or whatever, usually if it's local, you'll get asked for your skin color, which is totally normal, not for your race or ethnicity. But over here we have the U.S. Census as well. But in the census, we have to choose a race, and that's been going on since forever. So you could see in the census for Puerto Rico where it says like, oh, something percent white, something percent black, something percent other, and people try to use that as an accurate way of representing Puerto Rico, which is not really true because I've seen like family members who are like, like my skin color brown, put themselves as white in the census because there's no like mixed option or anything like that. So, but with the racial division, yeah, it's been happening a lot more recently, with even Puerto Ricans trying to like call themselves Taino or black or white, things like that. Where at the end of the day, it really doesn't make any sense because yeah, there are some Puerto Ricans who are like with majority like white families and whatnot, but at the end of the day, that race doesn't show your culture. What shows your culture is being Boricua, being Puerto Rican. Being white is not your culture. Being black is not your culture. Being Taino is not your culture. Your culture is Puerto Rican. It's Boricua. Um, but people still like obsessed about race over here, and it's been more recent, but it's been accelerating, unfortunately, especially now with the internet existing, and like unfortunately the diaspora, um, specifically the Puerto Rican diaspora, they kind of ruined stuff for us over here because they are very racially obsessed, and it kind of comes over here not just from them but also from things like the media and academia. And I've seen a lot of, I guess I could call it delusional Puerto Ricans, where You look at them, they have like white skin and blue eyes, and they call themselves Taino, um, or vice versa. Like brown Puerto Ricans calling themselves white. Like I get it, you have Spanish blood in you, you have Taino blood in you, but you're not either or. You're Puerto Rican.
I feel like when I'm in my country, I'm in my homeland, and we have to be honest, right? Caribbean Hispanics look a little different versus other Hispanics, right? Um, unless you're gonna include Panama, Colombia, was Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
We all have we might have like a similar type mixtures, like a similar look,
Yes.
and that's for a reason.
Hmm.
And and to be honest with you, like for a long time when I'm in Dominican Republic, I never went through that. Like I always felt at home, right? Um, in DR, you have these places, you have like a little Chinatowns, right? Like little enclaves similar to in America, where they have it in San Francisco, New York City, or in Massachusetts, and Boston. That despite of their physical appearance, they're still accepted in the community because of their culture, their upbringing. There's people that look like I used to always mention this, that they look like Jackie Chan with a tan. Hay chino en República Dominicana que yo, you look at them and oh yeah, he looked like a chino, but as soon as he starts speaking Spanish, he speaks it with a better Dominican accent than I do. So I'm like, damn, like he grew up with that flavor in him. Like someone said earlier, I love that metaphor or that similitude of sancocho. We are a sancocho, and we are not the Hispanics. Like, are not the only countries or cultures that have to deal with that. Where you're, where in your country you have people that look different, differently. Physically, they look different, but it doesn't mean that you separate them by racial class. You go to Jamaica, Trinidad, it's just numerous countries where they don't have to go through that. And I think now that since America, they had the Civil War and they have a different racial history and slavery and it wasn't apartheid, but they had like Jim Crow and segregation and things like that. Those are not things that we experienced in Latin America. So our reality with blackness is different. And I don't think that's and I think that's the reason that they don't understand us. That we accept each part of us. And that's pretty much it, bro. That I don't think they understand that we love each part. That we can't hate the un primo, una hermana que sea más negrito, salga más blanco o indio. We don't have that outlook on people because we know in our countries everyone looks different.
What we can do is, you know, dig deeper into our identity and our culture, be informed, be empowered. And at the same time, that will keep us grounded because we already have an identity. So, with that being said, that just causes more confusion and it makes people to feel more lost and empty on inside. So that's where I will be able to contribute with that question.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. In a way, we have like the visibility of the Hispanic community has increased tremendously in the last 20 years with um, a stronger presence in the media, in academia, and in different spaces. But to see, like Salsa mentioned, that I've seen a couple of women on social media as well. Like kind of everybody wants to be Latina or just kind of emulating certain parts of us in a way that doesn't feel authentic. And I think like Peter said, it can confuse some of the younger Hispanic generation. So it's important to like reclaim our history, reclaim who we are, and keep the narratives as real as possible.
Because I feel like, yes, in the past 20 years or so, I think Hispanics have a huge visibility now. We can't be ignored, of course. So that's why it's very important that shows like this, fighters and Peters and other things that we do on social media to spread awareness about who we are. We're basically here to raise our voice, that we're going to write our stories. We're going to enlighten the world of who we are and what's our place and our stake in this world.
Well, I'm definitely someone who gatekeeps being Puerto Rican a lot. And like Galletica said, I do have certain mixed feelings about it because I have seen many people who are, you know, by papers Puerto Rican, but I would never call them that, especially people from the diaspora. A lot of Puerto Ricans, unfortunately, in the U.S., they're very Americanized, and they don't speak Spanish. They've never been to the country. They don't really know anything about Puerto Rico except for like a couple salsa songs and some history, but not even like the major history. And then they try to represent what it is to be Puerto Rican. And what makes me angry is that a lot of these people, they don't even represent what it is to be Puerto Rican in a good manner. They try to kind of lie about being Puerto Rican. I don't know if they do it with well intentions or bad intentions, but I've seen a lot of these New Yorkers do it with bad intentions. For example, the Afrocentristas, like they try to say that all of our food comes from Africa, and that we're like majority African and whatnot, and that's just like straight up lies. Like, yeah, there are like African aspects in our culture, but I would just call them Puerto Rican aspects at the end of the day, because like the Spanish and the Taino, it all mixed together. Like you can't really differentiate. It's Puerto Rican at the end of the day.
Um, Dominican culture being mainstream. Wow. I mean, it doesn't now. So Dominican culture being mainstream doesn't bother me. What bothers me is what is the content? Like what part of it is it, the good or the bad that's being popularized or looked at nowadays? When you think of Dominican Republic, they're magnifying prostitution. Um, Dembo, I love Dembo. Like Dembo music, oh yeah, it's catchy, but Dembo has a dark side to it. If you pay attention to the video, I'm into art, I'm into music, I'm into film, so I pay attention to things that other people don't. People get caught up into the rhythm and music, but I pay attention to video, the details. There's a lot of oh man, I don't want to sound spooky or anything, but it has a dark side to it. Um, and it speaks against what we stand for. And that's not, I don't like that. I don't like that because that speaks to the subconscious of the children. And another thing is yeah, you go to places like DR was promoted, or you go to DR for the tourism. It's a beautiful Caribbean island. I've been to Soso when I was younger. They used to have this place called, it was a water park. Christopher Columbus water park. After Christopher Columbus, Columbo, right? So that was the only time I went to Sosua, and I never had heard about Sosua being this place where you go and you could get with women for the low. I never heard of that growing up. That was until recently. And people are promoting this. And I hate when they speak on that because they make it almost seem like that's the everyday average Dominican woman when that's not part of our culture. You know, many of our women, they're educated, or if they're not even educated or working women, they're great um mothers that, as stay home mothers. They raise their child correctly, they cook, they clean, they do all that stuff. So yeah, I don't like the way it's being promoted. I don't that offends me. It offends me because when you speak that way in that manner about our women back home, you're speaking about my sisters, my cousins, my mother, right? So yeah, I take it personal.
A lot of it has to do with um, there being a disconnect, uh, being assimilated, um, not knowing yourself, not being connected with your community.
You have children being raised by the system, not by their parents. So it's weakening the family structure. So it's, I think it goes beyond patriarchy. It's endangering what we hold near to our identity, which is, having a strong family, multi generational families, like being around your aunts, being around your grandparents. Like that's not seen as valuable anymore. Well, and I know you mentioned that like it's that post liberal, it's prominent in America, but I've seen some strains of it in the Dominican Republic too. Um, there's it's starting with like in it's starting in small waves, but I don't think that we're immune to it down in the island. Um, so that's definitely something to be aware of. I know within like the Ministry of Education, they've updated certain curriculums to talk about gender ideology and masculinity and you know the spectrum of sexuality. So I don't think that we're as out of the woods as we may think in the island, and to remove the that power structure, it weakens society. Strong men are leaders, strong men are providers, and um, you know you figure it out as a family. So removing that from the family structure, you disrupt what it is to have. I mean, that's the most sacred part of society, is to have a loving family, and that's to take that structure away. You have basically a weak people that need the government, weak people that need systems, and that are easily impressionable, that are led and swayed to do whatever you need them to do. So without family, you don't have a sense of who you are. So you take away the man, you take away the family.
Yeah, I think Galletica said it perfectly, but to add my 2 cents, I think, it's not just like the patriarchy. I rather call it just the natural way of humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I don't think neither man or woman is above each other. We just have different roles in society, in our communities. Even the Bible itself, from a religious standpoint, the Bible never tells you that the man is above the woman. It just tells you that the man and the woman have different responsibilities to make. And that doesn't mean that either is better than the other. Men need women as much as women need men, and women need men as much as men need women. It's a symbiotic relationship, and no one is above the other, because at the end of the day, the woman shares a lot of experiences with the children. Women are very responsible for raising our next generations, and so are men. But I guess women do bring that nurturing side to raising our children, and I think it's good for Hispanics, especially like Hispanic men, to realize that, because unfortunately, like on these sides of like our political spectrum or whatever, I've seen certain like Hispanic men try to use um, machismo or like masculinity as an excuse to talk bad about Hispanic women. And that is like the least masculine thing a man could do. The least masculine thing a Hispanic man could do is to put his own woman down. And the same thing, the least feminine thing a woman could do is to put her own men down, because we're all fighting the same fight. We're all in the same struggle. And when we start throwing bricks at each other, that just means that we lost.
The family structure, the that's what's important of any community. The husband, the wife, and the child. That's what represents a society, right? A society, period. And we can't lose hold of that. And I think that if anything, the men should be held responsible because we're the leaders in our little world. So anytime that you see degeneracy is because the men are becoming weak and there's no discipline, there's no law.
We're mixed descendants. We're the product of, those first contact interactions. One that I mentioned earlier, Ivan Van Sertima, they dealt with a lot of information at the time that today has been debunked by major DNA testing. So it's important, as I said before, that, we be informed, we be empowered, and most importantly, to be grounded within reality.
I have. I think it's just another way of hijacking our identity and our culture. And I think the most disappointing part is that it's kind of working, especially with like younger people. And I suppose not just Puerto Ricans, but like Dominicans and other Hispanics. They kind of like fall for this trap just because they're trying to isolate themselves from their, I guess, colonizer blood as much as possible. And the one thing that I would say to these people is that it doesn't matter how much you try to isolate yourself from that blood, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter how much you try to call yourself like African or Taino. If the Tainos were still around in Puerto Rico, you would be their enemy. If the Africans were still around in Puerto Rico, you would be their enemy. It doesn't matter if you have a little bit of them, you still have that Spanish aspect in you. And nothing is going to change that. And I think that people just distract themselves with this stuff way too much. They don't even realize the problems that we're facing right now. They think the biggest problems that we have are racial. When, the biggest racial problem that we have is like gringos coming over here and taking our land. And nobody wants to talk about that because they just want to talk about how Taino or African they are.
But I do stand with the fact that out of all the Hispanics, I'm not sure with Cuba, maybe, but we are the least indigenous. From the information that I've gathered.
I think Cuba is less indigenous.
Right, right. So just from what I've gathered, they're the least, and maybe what has a lot to do with it is the fact that Columbus, Europe, they came in contact with us first, and they civilized. We're the new world. We're the genesis of the new world. So mixing has been going on longer with us. So they eradicated the indigenous side more. Now, is that still the small element? Yes, but it's still an element. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it, because even though I'm from the eastern side of the island, like well, of Dominican Republic, I'm San Pedro de Macorís, right? So like right next to Santo Domingo. I lived also in El Cibao, which is like the center of the island or the country. In El Cibao and Bonao. And Bonao was named after an indigenous or a Taino person. So yeah, like I still do believe that we have residue of Tainos. Listen, when they introduced that argument of blackness, right? That's a very vague statement because that's like saying that's like that argument. Oh, is the world flat? Is the earth flat? Like it's a new concept that seems so preposterous and out of nowhere, spontaneous. So nah, I don't know. I don't think that reflects our country. I think the fact that people traveled and people intermixed makes more sense. That makes way more sense. Like when you go to, and this is the thing too. Like I don't just study Dominican Republic. When you go to other countries, the same similar situations, the patterns are happening there too. So like you go to like Suriname in South America, right? Same thing. They have intermixing. People came at different periods of time. So I think you have to negate that. Like I think someone used this term earlier. Is pseudo. That's pseudo knowledge, pseudo science. Just new perspectives that people bring on because maybe they wanted to adhere to their people or whatnot. So yeah.